I'm not going to spend very much time talking about this, but as you know, around the middle of this previous week, the XRP SEC lawsuit finally came to an end. There's plenty of stories about it, so I don't have to read this whole thing. You've probably already seen it. Ripple's XRP summary judgment positive for Coinbase. Price target raised to $120. Now, they're talking specifically about the Coinbase stock. It says the court's decision should moderately de-risk the regulatory pressure on the crypto exchange's stock, which is a significant overhang on the share price, the broker's report said. The U.S. District Court ruling that Ripple's XRP token should not be considered a security if sold via an exchange or through programmatic sales is positive for Coinbase shares, since it sets a precedent that token sales through exchanges, at least in the case of XRP, did not violate securities laws, broker Needham said on Friday. So, bottom line is, you can read the rest of this shit yourself, but the bottom line is, Ripple is only a security when it's sold to businesses and companies. As long as it's sold through exchanges to individuals such as me or yourself, that does not mean it's a security, and therefore this was a split decision. So a lot of people are just trying to drum up hype and, oh yes, Ripple won. No. Ripple didn't win. Ripple got a split decision, and they still ended up having to pay because it was determined that if sold to a corporation or a company, that it is a security. So anyway, I was watching the price of it. Now I'm thinking back, and I've told the story way before. I'm thinking back to when we were in the office all around the water cooler. I'm thinking about the people now this was before, how should I say, this was like right before 2018. So you figure about 2016 to 2018. Two of the altcoins that were getting the most talk at that time were Ripple and Tron. And I had a friend who, bought a lot of Ripple, bought a lot of Tron. And the sad thing is, he sold his position because, he saw that it pretty much was collapsing. So you're talking about this time right about here, because Ripple went from, basically pennies on the dollar to $3.37, and then it basically collapsed. And a whole lot of money was wiped out during that time. Now, fast forward to the current, and that's, 2023. So within the last year, what you see is the price has gone from, 33 cents to 72 cents, and that's this July. Now, again, I'm not going to spend much time on this. I would just like to continue to point out that the exact same issues that Ripple is going to have are the exact same issues that Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Litecoin already have had. The simple fact is, we are not in the pandemic anymore. People are not sitting at home with nothing to do with their money except gamble on the internet, gamble on stocks and whatnot, or buy video games, or buy computer parts, or buy computers, or figure out other things to do to keep themselves busy. Because if you really think about it, now looking back, because, this is hindsight, is 2020 vision. If you really think about it, first of all, the COVID fears started in November of 2019. We didn't even go on lockdown until March of 2020. So they gave it pretty much enough time to spread globally, and then they decided to lock us down. And if I'm not mistaken, that lockdown ended prematurely. See, first of all, and I brought this up before, the word quarantine comes from the Italian term quaranta, and that basically means 40. And in this case, you're talking about 40 days worth of quarantine. That never actually happened because they ended the quarantine early. Quarantine should have been 40 days of isolation. We didn't even get through a full month And there were so many people who were getting negatively affected mentally and physically that they said, nah, to hell with this. I don't give a fuck. It's like, fuck COVID. And if it hadn't been for all of these people willing to fight back against unconstitutional government demands, you never know how long that shit could have lasted. The point being, these cryptocurrencies were beneficiaries of 0% interest rates, which also, as you can see, benefited the housing market and benefited the automobile market, because 0% interest rates means that you can sell something that's expensive for less money because the people are borrowing the money at very low interest. That's number one. Number two, beneficiary of stimulus welfare checks, which the government was sending out, and these children were gambling away their stimulus checks. Now, keep in mind, look how many things popped up to take those stimulus checks from you. You had stock splits. You had the Reddit stock squeeze. You mean to tell me that these dumbass kids who can barely fucking count, you mean to tell me that these guys got it in their mind, yeah, let's do a stock squeeze on GameStop and a bunch of other companies? Of course not. And then we find out later that you've got somebody named Roaring Kitty, who's an insider, who got this idea. And he says, you know what? All I need is enough money to run a stock squeeze. And we can just be waiting to put the sell button. And once we push our sell button, everybody else will be trapped in there and they'll be holding the bag. Hindsight's 20/20 vision. Look what happened. It's exactly what happened. I remember going on these panels, these stupid manosphere panels, and arguing with these dumbasses. Oh, you know what? I called it a pump and dump. That's what I called it. I called it a pump and dump. Oh, no, it's not a pump and dump. It's not a pump and dump. You don't know what you're talking about. Blah, 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 blah. I got these other idiots, the ones who claim to be the IT and the math techs. Oh, no, what this is a gamma squeeze. You see, a gamma squeeze is when the delta outlines with the alpha and the delta and the gamma and the blah, blah, blah. Got to argue with these stupid idiots. And then it turns out 3 or 4 years later, I was 100% right. So as far as Ripple goes, the simple fact is, yeah, there's some people who got in there when it was like, pennies, and they might make a couple of dollars. But the simple fact is, it's not going to perform like Bitcoin did. It's not going to perform like Ethereum did. You're not like, the crazy thing is they're trying to convince people that you're on the cusp of the next, quote unquote, the next Bitcoin. It's like, no, you're not. If it's lucky, the hype might get a lot of people to throw their money at it, and it might get as high as maybe Litecoin. But this is not the next Bitcoin. Because, see, the problem is with the crypto market, not only don't you have 0% interest rates, you also don't have stimulus checks. You also don't have people with disposable income able to gamble on these things. But on top of that, their other problem is each other. Bitcoin itself could have possibly, I'll concede, I could have seen Bitcoin getting to $1 million per Bitcoin if Bitcoin was the only cryptocurrency. But obviously that's not true. There's too many competitors. Ripple is just one more competitor. Litecoin, Ethereum, those are competitors too, but Ripple's just one more. You can't even probably name anybody who actually has real whole Bitcoin. What you're doing is you're basically fighting other people over Bitcoin crumbs. You're fighting over Bitcoin crumbs. That's what you're doing. But the reality is there's not enough money to go around anymore. There's no disposable income. There's no welfare checks to gamble away. There's no 0% interest rates. There's no bargaining through margin. Basically the margin borrowers. These are people who don't have the money and they take out loans. And they basically bargain on the price using margins. You can't do that no more. You can't do that no more. It's over. So all of these things are gradually losing steam. I know there were some people really excited about Bitcoin 31,000 and this, that, and other. But the reality is, as I've said, don't wake me until it gets back to 68,000, because all them people who lost more than 65% of their wealth, yeah, those people bought in at 68. I'm pretty sure that they have a sour taste in their mouth. Right now, their mouth is like a hooker in Las Vegas, and there's this sour taste in their mouth that they just can't get rid of, no matter how many cigarettes they smoke. So that's just where that is. So Coinbase and Robinhood are still in the negatives. Those IPOs were scams, and that's just it. So yeah, they could talk about, this being positive for Coinbase. And what I do, and one of the things that I just should mention, is during that entire time that the lawsuit was waged against Ripple by the SEC, Ripple wasn't on any exchanges. Because it wasn't on any exchanges, I mean, there were a couple of these, untrustworthy apps. People lost money in those too. But because it wasn't on like Coinbase, which was actually a regulated exchange, they couldn't get as much money into it as they would have normally been able to get. What I will say is this. Coinbase has said now that the lawsuit's over that they're going to put Ripple back on Coinbase. When that happens, I expect that there will be a lot of people who try to throw their money into Ripple. I would assume that, if Coinbase has it, there'll be a couple of other exchanges that'll put it back on theirs. And at that same time, you'll see a couple of spikes in the price. But a lot of people who are already in it, who've probably lost a lot of money, chances are, if they can get back to a point where they get their money back, like where the value is positive, chances are that'll be the point where they sell all. So, you can expect that the price of Ripple may decline instead of grow considerably. Because keep in mind, they were really excited that it went to like 70-something cents. The thing about it is, I was watching it when it was $1 and it was dropping into the 30s and the 40s. So basically, you're still in the negatives. So, it is what it is. There are some people who think that they can get around sound investment. They think that they can get around real investment by gambling and Ponzi schemes. The thing about it is the SEC is all over you. The government, the IRS is all over you. You can't even make any money off this shit without filing that 1099-K. So whatever you have, you're going to end up losing because they're going to force you to file it. And if you don't, they're going to throw your ass in jail. It's just that simple. So, the powers that be have spoken. Here's a feel-good story for the week, because I know most of you who've probably listened to some of the things I said, you know that I wanted nothing more than to see Alex Mashinski being thrown headfirst into a cell next to Sam Scam Bankrupt Fraud, or Sam Bankman-Fried, whatever you want to call him. And basically, Christmas came early. So as you can see, and they didn't really talk about that. Like, this was not a breaking news alert like the FTX scandal. But they finally got this bastard. So it says, Celsius ex-CEO Alex Mashinski arrested on fraud charges. Now, what I have to say is thank you to Peter Schiff. Peter Schiff called this scumbag out because Mashinski and Peter Schiff had this long, drawn-out argument. Now, keep in mind, Peter Schiff is a cryptocurrency opponent, and Mashinski, obviously, is a proponent. So Peter Schiff called this person out, and he was like, wait a minute, how the hell are you offering 10% returns? The government and the banks can't even do that. And Mashinski basically had nothing to say, and since Peter was so busy battling with the moderator, who was obviously pro-crypto and was obviously pro-Mashinski and pro-scam and pro-Ponzi scheme, he's so busy arguing with her that he couldn't even get his thoughts out for the most part. And he even called her on it, which I'm glad he did, because he did it in a not-so-polite way. You got to stop being polite. When you're at war, you don't be polite. But anyway, Alex Mashinski arrested on Thursday morning. He and his former firm also face lawsuits from the SEC and other regulators. So basically they got him. It's about goddamn time. I believe he's stolen like more than $20 million worth of money through this crypto shit. And here's the thing. I'm not even going to read the story because the story is there. You can read it yourself. And you can read it from whatever news source you want to read it. My only main thing is I don't understand how we got to the point where you were able to convince people to tokenize their money. And once their money was tokenized, it became easy to steal. Alex Mashinski was taking investor money and using it to pump up his own coin. I believe it was called the Cell. I could be wrong about the actual term and the name and all that, but I had watched enough of it. And he was using investor money to pump up the Cell coin. And by pumping up the Cell coin, that was making it appear as if this was a viable business. And by doing that, he convinced other investors to invest in the Cell coin. Or I shouldn't even say investors, I really should say gamblers. So my thinking is, I'm thinking not so much about the bigger picture here. I'm thinking about the very basics. How is it that we've convinced people to tokenize their money? A token has no value at all. No token. No, Bitcoin has no value. Bitcoin has no value in that in order to even talk about how much it's worth, you have to talk about it in terms of US dollars. The same thing applies for all the other cryptocurrencies. A Litecoin means nothing. In order to talk about how much Litecoin is worth, you have to talk about it in terms of the US dollar, which is one of the reasons why I've always maintained that, number one, this shit has no intrinsic value at all. You're always at risk of losing the money because you can't insure it. There's no FDIC insurance. So if I have $100,000 cash in the bank, I actually have a government insurance on it just by virtue of it being in the bank. If you have $100,000 worth of Bitcoin, there is no insurance on it whatsoever, which the people at FTX and the people at Celsius, they found that out the hard way. How have we convinced people? Because you'd have to be a fool to think that the U.S. government has no way of backing up the U.S. dollar. And I've said this before, you know what backs up the U.S. dollar? I want you to walk over to a naval base and I want you to take a look at those F-35s that got nuclear bombs under their wingtips. That's what insures the U.S. dollar. I want you to go to Nellis Air Force Base. I want you to take a look at those rows and rows that they have of F-22 Raptors. Those Raptors that got internal bays where they got joint direct attack munitions. You know what that is? That's a bomb that I can drop from 60,000 feet and I can hit a target the size of a Volvo. And I can nuke that target because JDAMs can carry nuclear bombs. But the whole point of a JDAM is not only does it hit the target, but it actually goes through it. And it, like if you want to blow up a bunker, I can drop a bomb from 60,000 feet using an F-22. And that bomb will hit the target, tunnel through it, and then blow up inside the target and blow it to kingdom fucking come. So when somebody tells you that there's nothing insuring the U.S. dollar, I will take you and we can go to Nellis Air Force Base. I want you to see a B-2 bomber. And this thing has 16 fucking bombs on a rack. It's got like 2 racks inside and they rotate, right? So you got 8 bombs on each rack. And this thing drops fucking nukes. 16 nuclear fucking bombs that can make entire countries disappear. So when somebody tells you that there's nothing backing up the US dollar, I want to take you over to Ukraine and I want to show you like all the money and taxpayer dollars that were wasted by giving these people like rocket launches where they have this missile called the Javelin. And what you do is you point it at a tank and you fire the missile, right? The missile goes way up into the sky and then it turns around and it comes right down on the top of the tank and blows the fucking top of it off. So when these idiots want to say, oh yeah, there's nothing backing up the US dollar, I'll take you down to the precinct. I'll take you down to the nearest police precinct. And I'll show you the cops that have loaded 9mm handguns who are literally shooting and killing every single citizen that gets out of hand, especially those who have mental illness issues. So basically, if you see your neighbor and he's walking around with a knife and he's having a mental illness episode, calling the police on him is basically like if I'm the Godfather and I want to phone in the hit. So I say, hey, Luca Brasi, I need you to take care of this for me. So basically, I don't call Luca Brasi, I call 911. And I was like, yeah, 911. Hi, Luca Brasi. Yeah, I need you to come here. There's a neighbor, he's walking around with a knife, and I need you to take care of this. That's what it is. So when somebody tells you there's nothing backing it up, I can prove to you in 5 seconds you're wrong. How did we get to the point where we're tricking people into tokenizing their money, and now their money is in a form where normally it couldn't easily be stolen, and now it can be easily stolen? How did we get to that point?
Now, I understand that there's people who have their own investment ideas. Yeah, that's fine. My recommendation, however, is that you should make yourself a base index that you can invest in, and that index should be comprised of your favorite companies that you know that you want to invest in. So you already know my base index is called Mangoat. That's Microsoft, Apple, Nvidia, Google, and then there's oil and gas stocks that pay dividends, and then there's Tesla after Amazon, right? So for the most part, my base index are the main companies that make the Dow Jones grow so quickly. They are all basically trillion-dollar companies, or if they aren't trillion-dollar companies already, they're headed to being trillions of dollars. So for the most part, Mangoat is my primary index, right? And it goes without saying that it's doing very well. So as you know, Nvidia has basically been the main beneficiary of the AI craze, the artificial intelligence craze. But there are others. Of course, there's AMD, Micron, TSM, with Taiwan Semiconductors. And I'm not going to spend too much time talking about this, but once again, you should put together your own base index, and that would be where the bulk of your money goes. Now, when you do get dividends and you do want to reinvest into other companies, maybe you should make yourself a wish list. Or if not a wish list, maybe you should make yourself a secondary index. So mine, and I made this a while ago, so as you can see, it says $1,000 wish list. And the reason why is because when I bought these stocks, I put $1,000 into each one. And this was a while ago, so some of this information is a little bit old, but again, I'm not going to spend too much time talking about this. Micron is the government's bet against China taking over Taiwan and controlling semiconductors. They're building a factory right now in Troy, New York. Micron right now is still relatively low, but it is going to be big over time. You can bet on it. AMD, as you know, I told y'all about AMD back when it was $50. So I bought AMD around the pandemic. And I tried to tell you, I told you AMD, I told you Logitech, I'll never stop saying it. I told you to buy them. So if you bought them, well, you've doubled your money at least. But AMD is not going to stop here. AMD is going to probably end up chasing NVIDIA to be a $1 trillion company. So the question is, where will your money be? Then there's obviously TSM, that's Taiwan Semiconductors. Now, Visa, MasterCard, and American Express, they go without saying. These are not banks. These are credit card transfer protocols. They're used all over the world. American Express has kind of fallen back a little bit because their fees are so high. But there are a lot of rich people, older people, who they grew up with American Express and they stick to American Express. So that's the reason why Visa, MasterCard, and American Express I love. But as you can see, I'm doing very well with Visa, MasterCard. American Express, I'm doing okay, but I'm doing way better with MasterCard. And you got to remember, everybody's in MasterCard. Apple, Goldman Sachs uses MasterCard for the Apple Card. Just about everybody else uses Visa, especially for all your little crypto exchanges where they give you cards like Coinbase and Robinhood. They use Visa or they use MasterCard, but for the most part, some of them use Visa. This is how you have to apportion your money. Now, you may not be betting on as many shares and stocks as I am. But you have to figure out ways to, how should I say, organize your thoughts. You have to organize where you're putting your money. And as you know, I made this list and I've shared this list with you numerous times, my dividend earners, right? Apple, Microsoft, Sanofi, Gilead, General Electric, Nike, Citigroup, JP Morgan, Capital One, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, Logitech, EA, Nvidia, Siri, Exxon, BP, Sunoco, Chevron. And I'll just stop right there. Sunoco, of all of my dividend payers, Sunoco is the one that pays me the most in a year because I believe they pay their dividend like every single season. So Sunoco has been very good to me. I'll be holding that indefinitely. Chevron, Occidental, AT&T, Walmart, Verizon, obviously Visa and MasterCard. The automakers Ford, Stellantis, and GM are down right now. GM is actually at a point right now where if you have enough money to get into GM at the $30 point, this is a good time to get in. Valero, General Dynamics, Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, those are all military industrial complex companies. They pay a dividend, obviously, while they're waging war around the world. And then you have a couple of others like Sherwin-Williams, Intel, Micron, so forth and so on. Intel, I believe, is undervalued. Intel's going to be around for a long time. And you can tell Intel's going to be around for a long time based solely on where it is. It's Israel. When we're sending all that money over there, a lot of that ain't just for the military. A lot of that money's going to Israel, too. And it's going to Intel. So just as I know we're putting money into New York for Micron, and just as I know that Nancy Pelosi went over there in your face with her insider trading ass, and she was finagling NVIDIA and AMD and Taiwan Semiconductors. Well, basically, the government, it's funny because you think about it. Years ago, we would have never even known about that. Nancy Pelosi, now 10, 15 years ago, before social media, Nancy Pelosi would have flown right over there. She would have done her insider trading. You would have never known about it. You wouldn't have known. She would have said, "Oh yes, well I'm going to Taiwan on a diplomatic mission." Blah blah blah. And you would have assumed that it was about China versus Taiwan. You would have assumed that. You would have never realized that she's over there moving money. So now in this age, we have just as much information for the most part as they do. We can watch what they're doing real time. That's one of the reasons why you have Elon Musk and Zuckerberg fighting over who has the power to post where their airplanes are flying. Because we have so much information access. And I know they hate that. They don't like you being as knowledgeable as they are, because you can literally just sit back and watch these people and you can see them make moves. It's like Warren Buffett. Who really paid attention to what Warren Buffett was doing before social media? Like nobody. Nobody. Like very few people even knew who the guy was. But now you can see what he's investing in. And I have to say, Warren Buffett made a killing with BYD. When I was buying Chinese automotive companies, I specifically focused on NIO and KNDI. If I had really paid more attention to what Warren Buffett was doing at that time, I would have just bought BYD the same time he did. But we have a lot of information access. There's no excuse to be stupid. There's no excuse to be ignorant. You have, in the palm of your hand, you've got the information right there. So the question is, how are you going to invest your money? Are you going to waste it on motherfucking XRP and Bitcoin? Is that what you want to do? And then when your money disappears, you're going to try to scream and holler, Mashinski stole my money. Sam Bankman-Fried told me I was going to the moon. It's like you have to make these decisions for yourself, but it doesn't pay. And it's sad because there's so many of these crypto morons who think that because they watch YouTube and because they've read or participated in a couple of these what are those things called, these programs or these courses. They think that they're geniuses. I just think that's so funny. But bottom line is, scams are abounding. There's scams everywhere. There's scams. There's nothing but scams. Everything's a scam now. There's scams everywhere. The only way you can avoid it and to still get forward and make yourself some money, the only way you can avoid these scams is to stick to traditional tried and true investment strategies. And this nonsense that they're trying to push on you, I can honestly tell you that that's not it.
To be continued.